We are going to be cutting out the fabric for this apron. This is what it will look like when it's done. There will be a facing on the inside of the apron that has a channel that allows the tie to be adjustable. So that's the thing I like about this apron pattern. And that's what we're going to be doing today. This particular one is made out of duck fabric, which is a lightweight canvas, but we're going to be using all-purpose cotton plain weave fabric. So you'll need the pattern, of course. The pattern measurements come in either adult size or child size, so we're going to be cutting the adult size. And you'll need, obviously, some fabric scissors. You'll need a tape measure. A grid ruler is really handy. Some pins. You'll also need some marking tracing paper and a tracing wheel. They come, some of them are smooth, some of them are spiked. It's personal preference. And then this is waxy tracing paper that you'll need. You'll also need some woven fusible interfacing, which is what this is. So the bumpy side is the glue, and that's the part that's going to be ironed to the inside of your fabric. And then the other side is just smooth woven cotton fabric. And that's going to stabilize the inside facings here. This fabric piece right here is going to be kind of strengthened by that interfacing, and also the inside of your tie piece is going to be stabilized with that. So here's an apron that I was kind of lazy on when I made it, and I did not do the stabilizer in the tie. And this is kind of what happens if you don't do that when you wash it. It's just kind of just hard to be, you'll have to iron it every single time. It's just kind of lazy and messy. So that's why stabilizer is so important. Okay, let's get going here. So a couple of things to notice on the pattern pieces are these markings. And they are called pattern markings. So this right here, this marking with an arrow means grain of the fabric. That means that arrow should be exactly parallel to the selvage edge of your fabric, which is the edge that the loom holds on to in the weaving process. Some selvage edges have this little fuzzy strings, and some are smooth, and it's kind of a thicker piece of fabric on that end. It's usually about 1/2 inch wide, and you can tell, and it runs the entire length of the fabric. This width of the fabric is perpendicular to the grain of the fabric. So the grain means parallel to the selvage. Another detail to notice is these pieces, they say center front place on fold. That means when we lay the pattern piece down on the fabric, it has to be exactly lined up with the fold, so that when you unfold the piece after you cut it out, it's actually wider than it is when you cut it out. So there's a few pieces that you need to do that with. The tie pattern piece has the grain arrow, and it has a place on fold. So that means that if you have room on your fabric going the direction of the selvage, you can make ties in that direction, or you can have the option of placing them on the fold and cutting them perpendicular to the selvage. That kind of gives you some options with laying out fabric. Okay, another thing you're going to notice is these dots right here on the pattern, and we're going to actually be using our tracing paper and our tracing wheel to mark the fabric after we're done cutting it out. Okay, so we always want to start with the biggest piece first. The fold is nearest myself here, and this piece says center front, place on fold. So that means this edge of the pattern right here needs to be exactly stacked on top of the fold when we lay it out. So we're going to turn it around this way and line it up exactly on the fold. So I usually get it pretty close, and then I scoot it so that it's exactly in line. And then I put a pin near the center of the piece. And then you're going to work your way out from that pin, making sure that the rest of the pattern is stacked on the fold. If you don't stack it on exactly accurately on the fold, you're going to actually change the size of your finished product. So that's why it's so important to not have it close, but not quite. So you want to have it exactly lined up with the fold. Just put a few pins, okay? And then you kind of push smooth outward like this. And put some more pins. So how you pin is you press down in through the layers of the fabric, and then you kind of bend it, and then it is easier to pin and you're not stabbing yourself. Also, you want to make sure that your pin is inside the paper when you're done, so that if it's like this, for example, you're going to run into that pin when you're cutting, because that's exactly where we're going to be cutting, and that's going to ruin the blade of your scissors. So I like to start and face the center if I can with my pins. You just want every few inches another pin, especially where it's something like this, where the details of the pattern change. Kind of want to make sure that you're not letting that paper move while you're cutting it out. So one more here. Okay, having that piece set sort of determines where the rest of them can go. So I'm going to slide it this way so you can see. And this piece here is the facing of the front of the apron. So this also needs to be placed on the fold. So if you placed it like this, you're actually going to be wasting a lot of fabric, because this part basically is unusable, and so is this. So what we can do is flip our pattern upside down, because we can see through it, and then we can line our fold up right here and anchor our fold. Now, since this is a double-sided pattern, a double-sized pattern, we're going to actually turn back this child size line right here and pin that down so we don't accidentally cut that off. And now we're just going to put a few strategic pins. The adult size line is the one that's furthest out. And here on the inside of the curve, the adult size line is actually the inside. So we're going to pin near that line, because this we're going to mark with our tracing wheel and fold back. Okay, and I added a little bit of length here, so I'm going to fold that back because we don't need it this time. Okay, and then you want to make sure your pattern is smooth. You don't want any bubbles, because that will change the shape of the piece when you cut it out and try to use it. So nice and smooth. Okay. Now, our tie, we have a couple of options. We do have space here to cut. We need 2 on the fold. So we would put one down, cut it, and then move it and cut another one. Another option we could do is fold this up and cut 2 at once, placing it on the fold, because we would have 4 layers of fabric right here, and we would get both of what we needed at once. Another option is, if your fabric's long enough, you could place it here after these are all cut, and then you would fold your salvages this way. So those are some options. I think what we're going to do is fold up here. You just want to bring the fold to the fold, stack it exactly. I know it's probably not the most efficient use of fabric, but sometimes time is more needed than fabric. So I'm just going to stack this right here on the fold and line it up across, and then I will pin it. Oop. See, my fabric isn't cut straight right here, so I actually have to scoot down a little bit here with my piece. Stack it up. If you put two pins like this, this won't move, and then you can still move that where you need to be. And put a couple more. Make sure you're pinning through all 4 layers of fabric, though, if you do it this way, because you're pinning through thicker fabric. And then since we have the salvage here, we're actually just going to cut straight off, and then we'll trim that salvage off later. Okay, so that's how it is laid out. We will cut those out. Let's mark this, though, real fast. So how you mark this, you don't need both sides of the fabric, because we need to see a cutting line. So all we're going to do is slide our marking paper underneath the pattern here. And our pin here is probably going to stop our pattern from going too far. And all you're going to do is you're going to take your little wheel and you're going to wiggle back and forth on the line like this. You can see the line in the pattern. Okay, that's all we needed to do. So that is what this is going to look like. And now once you cut the rest of this, you'll see your cutting line here. So this, if I cut these things out, I already have them cut out of a different fabric here. This is what you'll end up with, is unfolded your ties, 2 ties. So this is what they looked like before. I cut them out on the fold before, just like we laid them out today. Okay, and then I have 2 of the same pattern. I'll show you how to do that out of the interfacing. And then I have the apron body cut on the fold. Okay, we also cut out pockets, which actually I forgot to show you. So if you're laying out your fabric and your patterns on your fabric, your pocket piece, which actually kind of disappeared on me, okay, so this one has the grain of the fabric, and we can't fit it here because too narrow. What we can do is right here. So how we do this is where it says grain of the fabric, you take one end of that arrow and you just pin it down to anchor it. Since we need 2 of these, we're just going to cut 1 time through both layers here, and then we'll get 2. Okay, so the way we can tell that this is straight on the grain is if we use our ruler. And I like to just put my finger on the line through the ruler. You can see the line of the pattern. And then you want to line your edge up with the salvage edge. And I just keep my finger there, put my finger on the line through the ruler again, and then make sure that it's lined up here. And then I anchor the other side of the arrow here. And the rest you smooth out, and that's how you will get a straight pattern on your fabric. If you don't have a grid ruler, you can use your tape measure. You just do it the same way. You measure from the edge to the arrow. Keep your finger on where the arrow is, and then set the arrow down, the finger on the arrow, and then this, you just make sure is lined up. Okay, so you cut all those out. And now I'm going to show you how to cut out, or how to mark, actually, I'm sorry. We're going to mark these pocket pieces here. And we actually need these on both sides of the fabric so that they end up on both sides of the apron, both halves. So in this case, we're going to take out the pin that's right here, and we're going to actually slide our tracing paper kind of like this over. Looks like it's not wide enough, so I'll have to get another one. If your paper's wide enough, you can kind of open it and sandwich it. But we're going to actually put one on the bottom here underneath our fabric. And then we will lead this one inside underneath the pattern and on top of the outside of the fabric that we're going to be working with. You just want to make sure that line is covered with your paper, and you can see that it is here. So this is the adult size pocket placement line. So we're just going to kind of work our tracing wheel back and forth on those lines. You just draw exactly on those lines. And since you have your tracing paper on both sides, it's actually marking both sides at one time. So I think if you peek under here, you can see those lines marked. Now we're going to mark these dots here. So actually, when we stitch the part that these dots need to be marked, we're going to actually be seeing the inside of the fabric when we're stitching that. So I'm going to actually unpin this so that I can get my tracing paper inside between the two layers of fabric, so that it's actually on the other side, the wrong side of the fabric, when I'm going to put my apron together. So I'm going to actually fold my paper like this so that it's waxy on both sides. I'm going to sneak it in here in between the two layers. And then I'm going to smooth my pattern back together. And I like to just draw a little line, a straight line, where those two dots are. And I connect them like this so that I can tell which direction I need to leave open. So you won't see the markings on the right side of the fabric, but if you look on the inside, the wrong side of the fabric, you can see those markings on both sides. It's a lot more faint on this one, so I might actually go, I think I can see it though when I'm sewing. Those are the two markings you'll make, and then you'll make another marking with this pattern piece. Those two dots are here. So what I would do, I'm going to take this other one that I've already cut out. And show you. So this is the right side of my fabric, and this is the wrong side of my fabric, which will be inside out when I go to make my project. So I'm going to actually put those dots on the inside of my piece here. So I'm going to line up my pattern again. I'm going to sneak my marking paper inside. I just need this very corner though, don't need the whole piece. Okay, make sure that it's smooth and lined up. Okay, and then I'm going to hold this nicely into place. Now, these two lower dots are for the child size, so I want to mark these upper dots. So again, I'm just going to go across, straight line little up, and then I'm going to go connect them together. And that shows me where those dots are when I'm stitching. They'll make sense when we go to put the apron together. Now let's cut the pattern pieces out of the woven fusible stabilizer. So the only two pattern pieces that we need for this one are this piece, which is the facing, and the tie. The other pieces of the apron don't have stabilizer on them. So we're just going to use this piece and this piece on the fusible stabilizer. So let's lay that out next. So this particular stabilizer comes as 22 inches wide on the bolt. So it's not actually folded in half like our other fabric was. So we're actually going to use a longer length of it since it's not folded in half. So I like to just kind of unfold a bit to have it to work with. And I think what we're going to have to do is fold it the entire length of the ties. And that's going to be how long we need it. So you can line it up pretty close. This isn't as important to be straight on the grain like the fabric was. Okay, this is the piece that I added on length because I like my ties a little longer. And then this is how long, so we could actually go a little bit shorter. Place on fold. Okay. So here's our place on fold. We're going to stack that right on top of the fold here and then go straight down with it. Oops, now I folded it too much. Nice and smooth here. You don't want any wrinkles in it because then that means you didn't fold it smoothly and it's twisted. Okay, let's try it again. So stack it right on the fold here, get it close, and then pin it down. So you could do what you did with the tie and fold this over and have cut two at once, but I actually think it's just a little bit more accurate when I'm cutting interfacing to not do that. So I'm just going to do two separately. Okay, make sure your fabric's not pulling and your pattern's not pulling. And then you anchor it again. And then I would probably do one in the middle here just to keep it from shifting while you cut. Okay, so then we need to save some space. So let's pretend here's our next tie. And now we need to lay this piece down. So we could lay this one down and then we could trace our line again like we did before to cut. But actually what I like to do is use the piece that I cut out of the actual fabric. So you could line this up on the fold, smooth it out without stretching it. Or sometimes your interfacing is not exactly perfect and you might be working with kind of a scrap piece of interfacing and maybe it's only one layer thick. So what you could do is actually cut it one layer thick. Let's pretend this was big enough. You could just cut one layer thick like this. So a couple different ways. Maybe you have scrap interfacing that this piece would fit onto. I'm just going to fold it though and cut it out like that. Now, you really do want to stack this right on top of the fold again, like you did with your pattern on the other fabric. And it really is so important to line it up. Like if this is off just the tiniest bit, it will actually not be the same shape when you cut it out and when you go to put it together. So you want exactly the same thing that you had before. Okay, and then I want to smooth without pulling. I don't want to stretch my fabric at all, but I don't want there to be any bubbles in it because that, again, will change the shape of the actual piece that I'm trying to use. So this, I'm just going to let it lay where it is when I smooth it out. It just kind of falls into place where it is, where it wants to be. Okay, so notice I did not stretch it because these curves, once you cut across the grain on the diagonal on a plain weave, it's actually called being cut on the bias of the fabric. And actually that's a really stretchy place in the fabric. So it stretches easily and it has a lot more give than if you would cut it perpendicular. So this curve by nature is more stretchy than the square corners of the tie. So we just really want to be careful and not distort that shape anymore. Okay, so then we're going to just cut these out. Then after we cut this one out, we're going to pick it up and set it down here, pin it again, and cut it again. So that's what we have here. And I also transferred the dots to my interfacing. So when you're done, you should have all of the pieces you need to make the apron.